So why should people really care about science and science of dogs?
So we are scientists, and usually people think we are just in our world doing our experiments and not caring about the practical work. But actually integrating scientific methods into dog training and care is crucial for several reasons, and the benefit extend to both professional as well as dog and pet owners. So first, understanding the disciplines that study dog behavior, dog cognition, and the dog in general provides insight into how years of selecting breeding have influenced various breeds, temperaments, and motivation. So unlike in the past, when dogs were primarily chosen for specific work roles such as herding, hunting, or guarding, today many people select dogs without fully understanding these inherited traits. So behavioral studies reveal how these characteristics, including willingness to cooperate, communication skills, persistence, social cognitions, affect dogs' daily life and interaction with humans. So understanding and being able to read such kind of articles or to have a blog that explains to everybody, also to pet owners, what we are studying is very important to understand our companions. Secondly, for dog professionals, adopting evidence-based training protocol is nowadays essential. So dog training has traditionally, for years and years, been seen as an art, with experienced trainers often relying on personal methods developed over many years. However, evidence-based approach leverage scientific research to identify the most effective training techniques. Studies on different training protocols provide data on what works best for various dogs and various breeds or various groups and allow the trainers to apply the most effective methods. But nowadays, grounding this practice in science ensures that the methods used are proven to be effective and humane. And dog trainers can do this if they can read and can understand the science that we do. So your work, Annika, aims to bridge the gap between scientific research and practical application, and this is great. And hopefully a lot of dog trainers and owners will be able to understand what we do in our little world and in our little experiments.
And it's not so little, as you say, right? It's really huge. So there are different topics covered by dog research and dog science. And also with your help, we try to get this out to the people, right? Which is really great. So what do you think? Why should people know about methods, how to measure behavior and how we do it in a scientific way?
When we talk about measuring behaviors, when we talk with trainers and pet owners, there are a lot of phenomena coming inside. So we often interpret the dog behavior in a way as we would interpret humans' behaviors or children behaviors. Of course, we know this is not right, but how can we instead see dog behaviors in an objective way? So measuring behavior is one of the essential part that our disciplines is based on. So we study the dog behavior. We, of course, do a research question. We are studying a phenomenon, and how we do it, one of the important part is measuring the behavior. So what the dog is doing. What we are understanding from what is doing is based on how we measure this. So we often think to know what we are observing, but our way of seeing things is usually shaded by our experience. So we see what we are used to observe. And training in measuring behavior scientifically is like training in Latin for your reasoning, and is the same with measuring behavior in an objective way. So if you train on how we scientists measure behavior, then you will see things in different perspectives. So you will not interpret the dog behavior as you are used to, but you will see more shaded, more precise behaviors that you maybe were not used to observe. And then you will also be able to enrich your skill about interpreting dog behavior. So I train a lot of students, for example, on to be a certified dog facts coders. And sometimes they maybe have a dog at home, but they are not used to observe what then we train them to observe and to analyze. So they are first not so skilled in recognizing what they are seeing, but then they become very sensitive to see very subtle facial expressions as well as subtle movements in the dogs, and these actually change their way of understanding them. So I think this kind of training really enable us to be more skillful to read the dogs and to have new perspective on them.
So what do you think? How do scientists actually define behavior? Because I know for scientists it's always important to define things. So how does science understand behavior to be?
The behaviors, the action and reactions of the organisms in response to something. So organism does not live in an empty environment, they live in their surroundings, and behaviors are the movement in time and space, and these are measurable metrics that characterize the interaction that the organism has with this environment. So when we measure behavior, we are never measuring behavior in like empty universe. It is an interaction of the dog with its environment and is characterized by the fact that there is something we can measure. So sometimes also psychologists and ethologists do the example of the dead body. The dead body is not doing any behavior. Everything that is a behavior is something that a dead body is not doing. So even breathing, sleeping, for example, for the ethologist is also a behavior. And it's very important their surroundings. So when we, for example, are measuring affective relationship in dogs and wild animals, one of the measures that is very important for how long one individual, one organism is sleeping near to another organism. So we have a characteristic in time and in space for how long and where in the environment near who the organism is sleeping. So even for a very simple behavior, we can characterize it in some way or the other. And this is important also for dog owners and especially for dog trainers to always characterize their environment, where I am observing the dog, for how long, because maybe I think a dog is aggressive or a dog is very shy, but I just observed this dog in a new environment for 1 minute. So when we take into account the characteristic of the environment and for how long we are measuring these behaviors, then we can structure a more like scientific based observation. So, okay, let's see this dog for 5 minutes, and we take the 5 minutes with a clock. So we are sure that we are always measuring the same amount of time in the same environment. And then I can evaluate actually whether this dog is performing shy behaviors or not.
So what you said now reminded me of a sentence that I knew from Paul Watzlawick. You cannot not communicate. So it's the same for behavior. You cannot not behave, right? Everything is behavior. So even kind of absence of really active movement is behavior, like sleeping.
Exactly.
True?
Just to be that is not the behavior.
Exactly. So there's one really important key term in behavior research, which is the ethogram. And in your articles, you wrote a lot about it, about the dog ethogram. So can you explain to people what actually is an ethogram and why do we need it and what does it mean?
So an ethogram is actually a very simple and understandable tool that everybody who wants to measure behavior accurately and reliably needs to know. So the ethogram simply consists in the name of the behavior in a list. The components of the list are the name of the behavior and a definition. So, for example, yawning, we can define yawning as the dog is opening its mouth and it's stretching it very wide, and it can last some seconds. And well, people would think, okay, that's easy. And now we observe, for example, the video of the dog that is opening the mouth, stretching it out, but is not actually yawning. So as a common knowledge, we know what is a yawn, but then this definition needs to be specific. It needs to characterize a behavior that is a yawn and needs to exclude the other behavior that are maybe mouth stretching but not yawns. A list of behavior: walking, the dog is walking at a slow pace, one leg after the other, instead of galloping, that has a suspension phase. But then actually, one very important phase of the ethogram construction is that we do this definition, we set a list of behaviors with their definition, and then we take a bunch of videos of the species, of the animal we want to observe, and we say, okay, now based on our definition, we need to identify and say how many of this behavior is the dog performing. For example, this is often happening when we define aggressive behavior. So we have a basic ethogram in which there is the operational definition of a behavior. So what is the behavior consisting of? And then there are the second order ethogram in which I can say, okay, I want to measure aggressive behaviors. So I'm already giving an interpretation of what the behavior means. So is meaning aggression. So once the dog wants to gain space between him and another opponent, and wants to actually attack the other opponent. So aggressive behavior is already a complex behavior. And how can we define, for example, aggressive posture? We can say, okay, the dog is with the muscle stance, with the tail above the back line, and with the head also above the neckline, with the ears forward. Okay, we all know how a dog in an aggressive posture looks like. But then, for example, I see a dog with the head, the ears and the mouth growling, but then the tail is lower down and there is no pile erection. So is this aggression or not? So when we define the ethogram and we also train ourselves to define behaviors, we see that actually behaviors are made of a lot of different components that can change. And then we also train ourselves to see these changes. And this could also be very important for dog trainer and owners, because then they become more sensitive in observing all these changes. Okay, maybe this is not aggressive, maybe this is aggressive, but the motivation is different. And this can be interpreted and infer from observable changes, the tail, for example. So this is a little bit of the basis of what is an ethogram. Then in the article, we will go more into detail and summarize what are the main components and how you can build up your own ethogram for your own observations.
Because interestingly, there's no standardized ethogram existing on dogs, right? It covers dog behavior. So this is something we need to...
Exactly. We will do an article trying to do a map of which are the most complete books that are out there. But no, we don't have a very good manual that is science-based that can enable us to really study the dog ethogram.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Giulia. This gave us really a good impression of your amazing articles. And yeah, let's dive more into this topic because I think it's so valuable and interesting for all the people out there, the dog professionals, as well as owners who want to understand their dog better.